I hate to-do lists. I mean, I'll do one if I have to, but the idea of running your whole life based on a bunch of to-dos just sounds awful. I tried it. I have a copy of Getting Things Done. I have the pro version of Notion. I even bought a bunch of templates from famous YouTubers. But it never sticks. Mostly it's because I'm lazy. Okay, I don't really call myself lazy, and neither should you. But I realize for me, these tools only work when I'm at my best, not when I'm at my worst. I was searching for a solution to this for years, until I found the one question that has driven me to accomplish more than any productivity tool that I've ever tried. So I'm going to tell you what that question is, how to narrow down productivity to just 2 tools, and why you need to ditch your to-do lists. But first, I got to tell you how I stumbled upon this question in the first place. See, back in junior high school, I was an inconsistent student. I'd have semesters where I'd get straight A's, followed by semesters where I'd get B's and C's. Usually it corresponded to a girl I was dating or a job I was working. I just never took school as seriously as my teachers thought I should, but I knew that if I didn't start getting better grades, I wouldn't get into a good university, which looking back didn't really matter that much, but whatever. So I had to figure out how to get good grades all the time. But I had a few problems. Number one, I didn't like studying. Most of the stuff we were learning was boring to me, like biology, history, and language. And number 3, all the straight A students seemed like they hated their lives. And it was that last one that really got me. Why would I want to live the life of a straight A student? They studied all the time, had no social life, and complained all the time. But I didn't know any other way, so I started doing everything that they did. I'd read every chapter, do all the assignments, write all the essays, make flashcards, and study my ass off. And because I always had a job and or a girlfriend, I'd often have to stay up late to do it all. And you can imagine, it quickly burned me out. And somewhere around my second semester of doing that, I said, F this. I don't care about going to college. I'm going to do the minimum possible to pass this class. But what was the minimum required? I remember a history class from the last semester where I'd taken notes in every class, read the book, and did all the exercises and projects. I was super proud of what I'd done prior to the final, and I knew I would crush it. And I did. But I remember being disappointed because all the questions in the final were just based on things he talked about in class. All the reading assignments and extra stuff didn't make a difference. I'd still have gotten an A just by showing up and taking notes. So I decided for this next semester, the minimum would be to just show up for class and take diligent notes. And when the final came around, I would just study those. If I got a B or a C, I'd be fine with it because I just didn't care about university anymore. But it's hard to believe what happened next. It turns out that all the history, sociology, and language type classes work like this. And I got A's just by listening and writing notes in class. And the only difference between the math and science was doing a few equations and practice problems to nail down those concepts. I had found a loophole and saved myself hours of study. And it came from asking myself, what is the minimum I could do to pass? Now, I've since changed that question to apply to all other areas of life. And that is step number 1. Ask yourself, how can I make this easy? This simple question forces you to think about your tasks and your life differently than most people. Most straight A students and overachievers are just following instructions. Someone gives them a game to play with clear rules like get straight A's. And the rules are you have to take notes, read the text, do all the exercises, make flashcards, etc., etc. Maybe a game is get into a good university, and that is get straight A's, sign up for all the clubs, do community service, play sports, etc. Maybe it's getting a high-paying job, and that is apply to all the jobs, create a great resume, do a cover letter, etc. And maybe your goal is to get promoted, and that means you're going to work late, you're going to deliver all the projects and impress your boss. And they follow all these rules until they win the game with enough time and effort. But if you study those rules closely, you will always find loopholes, ways to get there faster with less effort. So if you take that goal of getting straight A's, then you could attend class, take notes, and study the notes, and skip all the other stuff. If your goal is to get into a good university, you can crush the SAT or whatever standardized test, write a great essay, and apply early. If your goal is to get a high-paying job, maybe you can apprentice or work for free at first and then work on commission and then ask friends for recommendations. If your goal is to get promoted, the easiest way is to switch companies. When you ask yourself, how can I make this easy? It forces you to zoom out and ask better questions. The questions I like are, what is the this I'm trying to accomplish? And what are most people missing? And who has accomplished this goal with less effort in less time? When you take the time to think through these questions up front, you save days of time later on when you're doing the work. And this lesson served me well throughout high school and college. Unfortunately, it didn't stick into my working life until I'd learned step number 2. You see, I got myself a corporate job working around a bunch of overachievers again. It was a new environment, and I adapted by doing what everyone else was doing. I would show up early, I would work late, I'd answer every incoming email or message, I'd create a bunch of to-do lists. And I'd get reinforced for this because my bosses did the same. They'd send a note and expect an immediate reply, and you felt like you were winning if you got back the fastest. The problem is you don't get a lot of work done that way. So in my spare time, I started learning how to be more productive. I wanted to get things done. So I read a book called Getting Things Done by David Allen. And he proposed a system of managing tasks that involved a bunch of inboxes, categories, and colors. Looks a lot like Notion right now. Now, I was an engineer at the time, so it appealed to my sense of order and organization. And in fact, the earliest templates in Notion and Evernote were all based on that book, Getting Things Done. So I created this system of files and folders to manage my day-to-day tasks. It was very satisfying, just like all those checklists are in Notion. But all the binders and notebooks and email folders and to-do list apps just gave me a bunch more boxes to check and stuff to do whenever I had a task. I had to have an inbox to put the task in, then I had to process the task and decide which project it belonged in, then I had to decide which context the task showed up in, office, home, car, grocery store. It was so much to keep track of. Now, I go through these periods of doing it absolutely perfectly for a few weeks, and then I'd fall off and have to spend a weekend catching up to get it back on track. I realized I was spending more time managing my to-do list than getting things done. Finally, I just said F this and tossed the whole thing. And that is step number 2. Ditch your to-do lists. The real secret to productivity isn't in managing your to-do lists. It's in focusing on the right task in the first place. Author Stephen Covey says, if the ladder is not leaning against the right wall, every step we take just gets us to the wrong place faster. My work was so focused on answering emails, texts, and managing my various to-do lists that I started to miss the point of the job in the first place. And that job was to develop software, and I'd only work on one small part of one project at a time. So I noticed that I'd get my best work done late in the afternoon when everyone left the office. I didn't have a bunch of emails or texts to respond to, I just worked. And because I didn't want to be working any later than I had to, I would get it done quickly and then leave. When I cut out all the noise and just focused on the work that was in front of me, I got a lot more done. So I started experimenting with ditching my to-do list, closing my email and messages, not attending meetings, and putting on headphones to focus during the day. A few people got annoyed at my lack of response, but I got a ton more done on the things they were actually paying me to do, and they quickly got over it as soon as they saw the actual results. Once I ditched my to-do list, I figured out that if I just asked, what are we trying to accomplish here? Every time I was given a task or a project, I could cut right through the noise. And when I opened my business and started trying to teach this to my staff, I learned the acronym WHOOP to help other people do the same. So whenever you're given something to do or whenever you set a goal, ask yourself this WHOOP question. So that's wish, outcome, obstacle, and plan. The wish is, what do I want? The outcome is, how do I measure success? How will I know if I'm getting what I want? The obstacle is, what is stopping me from getting the outcome immediately? And the plan is how I can overcome this obstacle. Believe it or not, this simple set of questions can replace a lot of your to-dos. I found that most of my to-do list was based on other people's ideas and priorities. When I go through this WHOOP process, my to-dos are based on what will get the outcome fastest, which is often none of the things that people suggested to me in the first place. In fact, what I often find is that people aren't even clear about the outcome they want, and the whole project was flawed to begin with. And if that's the case, then I'll let someone else work on that crappy project. And the funny thing is, when I started asking these questions, I started getting promoted to project manager, team lead, and eventually I was an international team lead for that company. And eventually I realized the purpose of that company wasn't for me, and I decided to open my own business. As I went down this rabbit hole of lazy productivity, I started eliminating most of the tools that I'd used in the past. There were no more apps, no more templates, no more fancy calendars. Now I only use 2 tools. Step 3. The only 2 tools I use now. So the first tool I use is the simple Google Calendar. There's nothing special about it. It's just my system of record for managing the meetings I've planned. I try to do as few of them as possible, but given the nature of my work, it is somewhat unavoidable. So I schedule time to focus, time to meet with my team, and any other leisure activities with my family. I actually hate having a full calendar, so I go through it every few weeks and eliminate the things that no longer work for me. The second tool I use is my journal. journal. And it's offline, tactile, and it helps me focus and think way more than any other online tool or app that I've ever used. I have a video over here where I walk through the exact steps I use to set up and use my journal. Thanks for watching this video, and if you enjoyed it, please consider subscribing, and we'll see you in the next one.